December 4th, 2002, high above the Tasman Sea, a Boeing 747 began its slow descent toward Auckland International Airport. Passengers shuffled in their seats and pondered a Tourism New Zealand video depicting the adventures, wonders and sense of pureness to be found in Aotearoa, New Zealand. At approximately 32,000 feet, a man stirred into action. No one about him noticed anything remarkable as he made his way to the aircraft's lavatory. This man, an Algerian academic named Ahmed Zaoui, was an enemy of his home country, sentenced to death on 3 occasions on terrorism charges. Within the privacy of the aircraft cubicle, Zaoui tore his fake passport into strips and flushed it down the toilet. Slowly, he returned to his seat, masking any anxiety. Mentally, he prepared to face New Zealand's immigration, where he would assert his right to asylum. The hours ahead set in train a rapid response. Believing Zaoui was a terrorist, presenting a serious risk to New Zealand's security, customs officers, police, intelligence officials and cabinet ministers built an argument that imprisoned Zaoui without charge pending a conclusion of the state's first security risk assessment. Almost 5 years later, at a cost in excess of 4 million New Zealand dollars, Ahmed Zaoui was set free. How did the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service get it so wrong?
Mr. Zaoui considers that the Director's decision today, read with the earlier Refugee Status Appeal Authority decision which granted him refugee status, puts an end to the false accusations originating from the Algerian military regime that he was at any time a terrorist or supporter of terrorism. In order to move forward, Mr. Zaoui has conceded that the making and maintaining by the Security Intelligence Service of the certificate against him was justified on the basis of the information that they held. But he does not accept that he has in fact at any time been a danger to the security of New Zealand or any other country.
What was the decisive moment in this procedure? The moment of change?
Well, I think we need to refer you to the statement of the Director about that. But certainly I can say that the hearing that took place in July and August for us was, we feel we presented the best possible defence for Mr. Zaoui, and we felt as though it was a very compelling defence, and our approach was to leave no stone unturned, and we feel we did just that.
And I can say that I am relieved, not because just my name is cleared by, but that in the way that the certificate is removed, and I'm not long considered as a threat to New Zealand.
New Zealand, I think, has a very, very perverse approach towards the issue of classified information. And I say perverse because this is a country that has grossly overclassified information that should be made readily available to the public. Not only that, but we have completely inadequate oversight mechanisms on the intelligence community. What passes for parliamentary oversight simply is not. It's a rubber stamping exercise, an after-the-fact briefing exercise that has no statutory authority to control or oversee or otherwise corral the intelligence services in their operational practices, as well as in this practice of classifying pretty much everything they do as if it was, the most highly sensitive national security issue on earth.
This Hollywood notion that intelligence agencies know everything and can be expected to save the day, it just doesn't work like that. For most people, their view of the intelligence agencies is shaped by what they see in Hollywood movies, where dashing spies, they save countries, they do amazing things, they know everything. The person driving down the road in the back of the van, he's punching in stuff, or she's punching in stuff, and up's coming bank account details, driver's licences, locations, dots going down maps on streets. Excuse me, it's bullshit. Some of this gear is very impressive, and there are things which would still surprise you to know, but that what Hollywood portrays is fantasy. It is impossible to know what everyone is doing, what everyone is thinking, what everyone is plotting or planning. And the more you focus on lower level threats, small secretive groups, the harder it is to know what is going on.
The attitude conveyed by the intelligence services towards Parliament as well as the public appears to be one of contempt. It seems to me that on the one hand, the intelligence services, and particularly the SIS, believe that the masses are asses and hence can simply not handle anything by the way of general knowledge information about matters of national security interest. On the other hand, it appears to loathe Parliament for its very existence as an inconvenience on the way to getting things done. And whereas that may be very common attitudes in authoritarian states and liberal democracies, it simply doesn't suit.
There is a lot of intelligence, or so-called intelligence, in circulation, which is unreliable, which is misleading, and which certainly should not be used as evidence against anyone for any purpose.
not it was a kind of a position that New Zealand should be considering.
Well, I think New Zealand should consider the trade implications, but I think in the case of Zaoui, it was a pretty long bow to draw, to be honest. You know, it was hard to see that connection in hindsight now.
By then it was totally dark. Offered to take him down to his car. He didn't want anyone with him. He almost pushed me back through the door and then disappeared into the night. It was quite a spooky feeling. I know that we all had to get out of the flat and clear the sort of the spiritual malaise, if you like.
Il a été éliminé, il a été empoisonné. Il est passé chez Spies, il a pris un café, il est sorti, il a eu des maux d'estomac, paf. Et pourquoi il a été éliminé? Parce que avec la démocratie, il a commencé à critiquer le régime, il a commencé à critiquer le dépassement, et il est devenu dangereux parce qu'il connaît pas grand ce qui s'est passé, parce qu'il a été alloué, il a été utilisé.
But it also needs to be borne in mind that the main violence was not just that of the GIA, even if they were engaged in the most spectacular issues of violence. The majority of the killings were carried out by the security services. And when you hear figures of 100,000 or 150,000 or even 200,000 people killed in the 1990s, you need to bear in mind that many of those people, the majority, probably died at the hands of the security services and not at the hands of the resistance.
The intelligence gathering is a process of evolution, and it's mainly dictated by technology. I mentioned earlier, I think, the days where we used to have surveillance units that used to follow and watch and observe and peer through binoculars. Today, tracking devices are fitted and interception warrants are obtained and bugs are put in houses, both audio and visual. And policemen and policewomen sit back and in the comfort of their police station and observe everything they need to observe.
This case, in terms of issues of natural justice, in terms of issues of the responsibilities of ministers to act legally, in terms of the role of the Security Intelligence Service and the branch of the police which is connected to that, not to investigate rather than to try and find a conviction. So many levels it's raised questions of, as a society, what our understanding of fairness and justice is, and we were found, I believe, to be wanting, and there's a wealth of material there and a need to study it very, very carefully so that it never happens again, and we are in the situation where we haven't done that yet, so it can happen again.
Since his arrival at Auckland International Airport, Ahmed Zaoui's presence challenged New Zealand's immigration laws and the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service's ability to accurately and independently assess relevant information underlying this case. This error cost the New Zealand taxpayer in excess of $4 million. For the first time publicly, Lieutenant Colonel Ahmed Zaoui, an Algerian intelligence officer who masterminded the disinformation campaign against Zaoui, publicly reveals why Algeria considered and considers Zaoui to be a danger. Zaoui also explained why the New Zealand intelligence services were fooled into believing Zaoui to be a risk to the nation's security.
Well, the most significant starting point of all this was I remember watching television of the report that a suspected high-level terrorist had entered New Zealand. And as someone who had done quite a lot of refugee law, I realised that there was a breach because this was his name and photographs of this particular person were being shown, and yet he'd applied for refugee status, and under the law you can't publicise, for obvious reasons, someone who's applying for refugee status.
There'd been all the super security around someone who'd arrived in the country, and allegations or swirling around that this person was a terrorist, and I just smelled a bit of a rat. And given the fact that members of parliament have the right to enter a prison at any time to look at the conditions under which someone was being held, I went out to Puremerero prison to see Ahmed Zaoui, and it was just terrific. He'd been separated off from the other prisoners, people in neighbouring cells shifted out, and the prison authorities at that point didn't, they wanted to observe my conversations with him. There was a really repressive atmosphere.
Started to get, from the very beginning, a bad smell to it. And then the then Minister of Immigration, Leanne Dalziel, called me and asked for my advice on whether Green MP Keith Locke was entitled to visit Mr. Ahmed Zaoui. She asked me because I'd been the Minister of Corrections, and she actually wanted me to say no, that he wasn't entitled to go and raise questions about why he was detained and who he was. I told her, well, no, I'm of the opinion that there's a very liberal interpretation for members of Parliament to have the right to visit anybody in a New Zealand prison. It's a safeguard for everybody, and that if he found things that he wanted to raise questions about, I said I wouldn't attempt to try and, I don't think it's right to try and shut him down.
he showed me the torture marks from, the way he'd been tortured when he was in Algeria, and he seemed a genuine person. And then when I learnt more about the case, that he was, representative of the Islamic Salvation Front, had run in the elections, and he was being discriminated against essentially for his political allegiance, that I thought, well, hold on, this person isn't necessarily a terrorist.
It became clear to me that the role, from the very beginning there, the role of the security service and the police and many of the government agencies was one where they were setting out from the very beginning to deny natural justice to Mr. Zaoui. And his rights were severely breached. And it seemed clear to me that the authorities involved with this were determined not to find the truth about the matter, but to get a conviction or to have Mr. Zaoui fail in his attempt, and then have him out of the country.
While on bail, Ahmed Zaoui and his legal team, Dr. Rodney Harrison, Deborah Manning and Richard McLeod, prepared a case based on a premise that an individual deemed a risk to New Zealand's security ought to be offered the same fundamental judicial rights as any other accused.
I must say, I believe that in the end the judiciary came through much better than the politicians, though at some lower levels they were still hiding a bit behind, well, the government has made this decision and security matter, and that blanket was thrown over justice, really. But later on at the Court of Appeal level, it was Justice Glazebrook made it very clear that they weren't going to be fooled by having just a security blanket thrown over issues which had to be determined in terms of whether or not justice was being afforded to Ahmed Zaoui. And finally, of course, the Supreme Court allowed him bail against the determined efforts of the executive to keep him in jail. Eventually it was 2 years that he was in jail, with the threat, of course, of always going back there.
We are here, Deborah.
First one? Next two folders. That's the index. That's the index. You can see who they are and the tab they are.
Yeah. François.
So very good
36
one.
person.
That is more. These are, we've got 50.
Macron.
Yeah. Is it you there?
There or there?
There.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
What was that music?
This one? I like this this chapter because talk about story of you, Joseph. It's a bit reflect my case. Story of Joseph and Jacob.
Yes.
When his brother put him in.
To Egypt.
Yeah.
They're singing about that.
Yeah.
So he's sold to slavery.
Yeah, that's the slavery. That's the story. I like this chapters because they reflect my case a bit. Because my youngest son, his name is Yusuf. And when I give him this name, I give him in purpose because I was frustrated. I have got a lot of pain in this time in Switzerland, and I give him this name in order to get some opportunity or some good omen or something like this. Yeah, that's what I like this chapter talking about Joseph. People still guess, who is this man, what's he want to come to do, and I am not enabled to talk to people about my project or why I come here or I can't. Sometimes I heard Radio New Zealand talk back and I find myself can't reply to him, can't defend myself. It's a bit what else I can say? It's there are many things who maybe make you forgive and forget, especially when you make yourself try to clean yourself and try to be more how can I say to put yourself on religion conception, because religion every time ask about forgiveness, ask about pardon. I think it's very important to every time to talk about to reconcile with people. If you don't reconcile.
I think in a lot of political controversies, ministers stand by a position that doesn't really hold up because they don't want egg on their face by being seen to back down, so they'll sort of try and just drive through it. And I think that was the case with the Zaoui affair, that they thought, well, we just got to keep going on this, and the SIS must have something on them so we can probably come out ahead.
In the case of Ahmed Zaoui, and here of course I can speak with no detailed knowledge because I have not seen what the security files claim to possess, you need to bear in mind that in Belgium he came into the views of the authorities as a result of their investigations into a trafficking operation. That's true. But don't forget, the opposition abroad is small. Algerians are bound to be in contact with each other, so to what extent he really was involved in such activities or not seems to me very doubtful. Beyond that too, the first court that heard the case in Belgium rejected the accusations and found him not guilty. And it was only on appeal that he was found guilty, but even then, for such a serious offence, the sentence he was given was trivial. It was actually house arrest. So one has the feeling that this was simply a formality.
Mr. Zambrari, or Colonel Zambrari, was a different kettle of fish because he had defected from the Algerian regime as a high-ranking official who's in charge of espionage and was their man in charge in Germany, who worked with their man in charge in Belgium and their man in charge in France to neutralise, which I believe meant including killing, opponents of the Algerian regime.
Ahmed Zaoui, jusqu'en 92, c'était rien du tout. C'était un simple militant du FIS, enfin responsable local du FIS, qui a été élu au Parlement de décembre 91, qui a été avorté, qui a été interrompu par les militaires. Ahmed Zaoui ne représentait rien. Cependant, son arrivée en Europe, à partir de 93, on a remarqué, parce que j'étais à l'étranger, j'étais en Europe, il commençait à mobiliser la communauté algérienne par son charisme, par sa manière didactique, de rhétorique, de sensibiliser les uns à la cause du Fils. Parce que le Fils, qu'on le veuille ou non, il a été spolié de sa victoire. Donc pour nous, ce bonhomme-là, à l'instar de certains autres, constituait une menace pour le régime. Le régime était aux abois.
I find the whole question of the allegations against him extremely difficult to sustain or to understand. They seem to me to reflect something which is typical of security services worldwide, which is that coincidence is something that has to have causality behind it. In other words, the very fact that two names may appear on the same dossier means automatically that they're linked, and thereby that they're engaged in common activities. And that's not really a very fair way or a very effective way of analysing information.
International qui pesait, donc il a fallu trouver un motif. Et puis on a constaté, à partir de 94, début 94, que Zaoui était l'un des initiateurs de la plateforme de Rome qui allait apporter la paix. Les militaires ne voulaient pas la paix, ils voulaient d'abord se justifier et dénoncer, voilà, pour des raisons. Donc c'était une menace pour le régime. Donc la paix signifie qu'il allait couper le soutien extérieur aux militaires.
With respect to the Rome solution that you've brought up before, was there, do you believe, an intelligence and also an Algerian state sensitivity to where Ahmed Zaoui was positioning himself politically with respect to that as a solution?
Well, I can't confirm that the Algerian authorities particularly targeted Ahmed Zaoui as a result of his involvement in the Sant'Egidio affair. What is certainly clear is that the Algerian government had no intention at all of becoming engaged in that initiative. It regarded it as an interference in Algerian sovereignty, as a disturbance of its own plans for dealing with the question of the insurrection, and it simply ignored it, refused to participate in it, and ignored its outcome. So to that extent, we know that the Algerian state was hostile to the initiative. Given the fact it was hostile, it would follow that it would have been hostile to those who had been involved in initiating it. And since Mr. Zaoui was acutely involved in the organisation and planning of the meeting and of its outcome, it's a perfectly reasonable supposition to suggest that it would have been hostile to him personally too. It already was on other grounds. So that's not surprising. Nor therefore would it be surprising if it began to allege to European security services that he was in some way involved in clandestine operations. It's a very common allegation. And the problem with such allegations is that by their very nature, they cannot easily be confirmed. And if then they're kept secret, and they're not revealed to public scrutiny or to legal scrutiny, there is no way of testing their validity. And that happens repeatedly and constantly, and could well have happened to him.
En 93, il y a eu l'opération Chrysanthème en France, décidée à la suite d'une manipulation en Algérie, la fausse arrestation des membres du consulat français. Ce n'était pas un kidnapping orchestré par les islamistes, mais c'était un montage de l'ASM et de la DST. Bref, sur cette base-là, Charles Pasqua, ministre de l'Intérieur en France, a déclenché l'opération Chrysanthème, il a interné des gens, Zaoui n'était pas concerné, Zaoui était en Belgique, donc on a alerté les autorités belges, les autorités de son activisme. Puisque parmi ces contacts, il y avait de tout, on ne pouvait pas contrôler tous ces contacts, on n'avait pas les moyens de police en étant à l'étranger, vous comprenez. Donc il était lui-même, il prêchait la bonne voie, mais vous savez aussi qu'on connaissait parmi ses points faibles, il vivait dans la clandestinité. Donc il n'avait pas de carte de séjour légale, c'était pas quelqu'un qui... Donc il a demandé, on avait appris qu'il avait demandé l'asile en Belgique, donc pour qu'on lui refuse, parce qu'on voulait le mettre. Donc on a sali, c'est oui. Puis il y a eu des contacts avec des gens qu'on repérait, il y a eu aussi de la manipulation certainement.
Most of the evidence that we would see about whether a person should come to the country, whether a person's a security risk, is not the information you could convict them on in a criminal court. They wouldn't survive the burden of proof. What we're talking about really is the information that would survive in a civil trial, the balance of probability. In other words, burden of proof, you've got to get 11 out of 12 jurors to say yes, absolutely no shadow of a doubt this person's guilty. The balance of probability is 6 out of 10 say, yeah, on balance, he's a bit unreliable. No, I wouldn't let the bugger in because, you know, he's been mixing in the wrong circles. I don't know about the evidence, but why should we have him in? Don't take the risk. And that's really the situation of Zaoui, that the evidence wasn't reliable, but in the absence of anything else, it cast sufficient doubt on the balance of probability. The SIS said, don't do it.
The attitude was going to be that we want him out of here. In fact, I know from conversations I had that there were discussions about how on earth do we just get rid of him? How do we force him out?
Un beau matin, la presse algérienne d'abord, qui annonce, la presse algérienne liée au service du DRS, Ahmed Zaoui, chef du GIA. Moi j'ai dit, et je le dis encore aujourd'hui, Ahmed Zaoui ne connaît personne du GIA. Et je suis sûr, si vous lui posez la question, il ne connaîtra personne. Bon, et puis qu'est-ce qu'elle a trouvé la police belge parmi que Zaoui avait un faux passeport. C'est vrai, c'est une infraction. On ne peut pas dire là. Ce passeport, c'est un passeport volé. Passeport danois, je crois. Si on a un faux passeport, il est forcément volé. C'est d'accord. Donc, sur la base de ce faux passeport, on lui a collé comment on appelle ça? Création d'un groupe subversif ou qui allait commettre des attentats terroristes, faux usage de faux, recel de malfaiteurs. C'était uniquement.
Well, whether it was the GIA communique or not, and this communique of course is open to many interpretations, first of all, I don't think a copy of it in its original form still exists. But the communique actually is very interesting. It proposes a caliphate government with Mr. Zaoui amongst the members. But the government it proposes happens to replicate in detail the structure of the then Algerian government in terms of the ministerial portfolios and so on. That's really very strange. Why would a government that actually wished to construct an Islamic state bother to recreate the structure of a secular state that it claimed it wished to oppose and destroy?
So you're kind of hinting there that it's basically like a framework without the names but the titles, and this document is a record.
That's right. What actually it seems to me occurred was that the communique was a forgery. It was false, and that's indeed what the GIA itself later said, and that the person who drew it up simply used as his template the existing Algerian government and then put in new names to populate the portfolios themselves. And in that way Mr. Zaoui was thereby implicated, and of course prima facie grounds were created by which he could be accused of being a GIA supporter and indeed being important to them. but the actual evidence for that simply doesn't exist.
And then it brought in the question of the use of the first issuing of a security certificate, and that despite being cleared by the Refugee Status Appeals Authority, in fact being found to be exactly what he said he was, a man of peace, a man fighting for human rights, a victim of torture, and a legitimate refugee, that he was still going to be kept in jail without charge. So I knew straight away there was a serious matter, and I began from that point to take it up with the ministers of the government, with the government itself, with my own leader, Jim Anderton, who was a minister in that government, and asked that a fresh approach be taken to this, and that the Refugee Status Appeals Authority decision be taken very seriously and investigated.
Mais c'est tout. Lui, ce qui nous faisait peur, c'était sa manière d'influencer les gens, parce qu'il parlait bien, connaissait le dossier, connaissait la situation, donc il expliquait les choses d'une manière, et il faisait adhérer les gens à sa cause. Donc, et en 94, puisqu'en 94, je me souviens très bien, c'était au mois d'août, qui a été monté de toutes pièces par nos services à l'extérieur, et il a rédigé un tract, un communiqué, où on disait que Ahmed Zaoui est ministre du gouvernement du Khalifa, il y a Mohamed Saïd, il y a Anwar al-Haddawa, tous les gens qu'on voulait qu'ils soient éjectés parce qu'ils étaient encore politiquement actifs à l'étranger. Voilà un petit peu. Et puis cette histoire-là l'a suivi pratiquement depuis 1994 jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Si aujourd'hui on lui refuse l'asile politique en Nouvelle-Zélande, c'est à cause justement de cette sombre histoire qui lui colle derrière, alors qu'il est très loin des histoires de jihad. Il n'a absolument rien à voir. Ça, vous pouvez me croire, je vous le garantis.
I'm afraid to say it's not just the question of that communique. I think there have been much more explicit attempts to, in some way, incorporate him into a series of associations which are damaging, because he's been associated not only with the GIA, he's been associated with other movements, some of which, by the way, were actually hostile to the GIA and to which the GIA itself was very hostile. There is a certain contradiction in that has never been properly explained. And movements which are still current today, in fact, on the most tenuous of grounds.
Are these movements that are alleged associations, or in fact?
The movements themselves are terrorist organisations.
I mean the association
well, one needs to be careful because there are a set of separate accusations that have nothing to do with terrorist organisations. But the terrorist organisation accusations are internally incoherent and inconsistent, and also in no way reflect the known facts about Mr. Zaoui, his life, his activities, his views and his beliefs. And it seems to me they represent a very successful smear by almost certainly the Algerian security services over probably a long period of time to in some way implicate him in the extreme violence that occurred inside Algeria. They don't represent a genuine or a fair accusation, and they don't provide the evidence by which such an accusation in a court of law could be sustained.
In fact, he'd been very dismissive of the methods of the Security Intelligence Service. He said clearly they would have known that the information they had against Zaoui was tainted, was not accurate, and that it was part of a frame-up by a very ruthless machine of an innocent man. He was very clear about that in the Netherlands as well as here. And he made it clear in the Netherlands that he only had to be in front of a tribunal and he could assure us that he would demolish the case of the security certificate against Ahmed Zaoui.
In the winter of 2007, Mohamed Zaoui appeared as a secret witness before New Zealand's Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, Justice Paul Neazor. The public, journalists and politicians were prevented from observing the proceedings. Once sworn in, Zaoui testified that Algeria's intelligence service, the DRS, had created disinformation against Ahmed Zaoui, and that the man was innocent of the terrorism charges he was convicted of in Algeria, France, and Belgium. Samraoui testified that he knew this due to him being the DRS's senior officer in North Europe from early to mid-1990s, and that he himself had helped to create the disinformation campaign. Meanwhile, Ahmed Zaoui's legal team prepared to present final submissions before Justice Neazor. While prevented from citing evidence against Zaoui, his defence was assisted by government-appointed special advocates Stuart Grieve QC and Chris Morris.
Okay, From time to time, we go into closed hearing. That is, the special advocates want to raise something with the Inspector General that concerns classified information. So we, private counsel, have to leave the hearing. And we've got no idea what it's about. And so, we've been presenting our submissions all day. And then they say we want to go into closed. So we all say goodbye and go away, and God knows what's happening. And then we troop in as though nothing's happened. And then pick up where we left off. It's like there's two parallel universes going on.
Now the problem with there's lots and lots of problems here. The evidence to be acceptable in court, there are a number of rules about how it is collected, how it is protected, safeguarded, how it's used, and so on. There needs to be a right for people to cross-examine it, to query it, to challenge it. Well, a lot of that doesn't occur with intelligence material. For a start, the way intelligence material is collected tends to make it unreliable unless used in large quantities with lots of different pieces of intelligence to collaborate other pieces of intelligence. No one piece of intelligence really should ever be used in isolation. You always want multiple sources, multiple moves, all backing each other up, so you become certain of something.
I have any comments, sorry.
Hi, good morning. This is Mr. Zaoui's first opportunity.
Let's not forget that before 9/11, in New Zealand, in Australia, in the US, the UK, Canada, in all those countries, before 9/11, the law was satisfactory. There was enough power in law for police to detain people who were conspiring to kill others, to bring people in for questioning, to take them to court, to jail them. All that power existed. Officials would have us thinking that police and intelligence services never had that power. They've always had a lot of power. We need to stop getting involved in all of this theatre of trying to, see who can be the toughest politician, which party can be toughest on national security. A lot of it is purely for political point scoring, and it's at the expense of ordinary people, like perhaps Mr. Zaoui, whether he's guilty or innocent. He is at risk of being denied a whole swag of basic human rights.
Claims that Ahmed Zaoui was involved with logistics in any militant faction of anything relating to terrorism are false.
Il n'a pas revenir à Ahmed Zaoui. je vous le dis. Il n'avait pas les moyens. Sa situation sociale ne lui permettait pas. Vous croyez que c'est facile d'acheter des armes en Europe et de les convoyer? Les filières, c'est pas facile. Parce que les militants du FIS, parce qu'on contrôlait leurs ressources. C'est pas l'impôt. L'impôt, ça se faisait en Algérie. Les grands trafics, la grande logistique. C'était le TRS qui l'a contrôlé. Les véhicules volés, les Mercedes, les véhicules de luxe volés en Europe. C'était pas les éléments du FIS. C'était des grands réseaux liés au service d'intelligence. La Mercedes de Beckenbauer qui a été volée en Allemagne, elle a été retrouvée à Schleff. Un général, je ne vous cite pas son nom, il roulait avec des véhicules volés. Vous pouvez me croire à 100% parce que je n'ai aucun avantage à vous mentir. Je ne vais tirer aucun profit. Moi, je veux uniquement la justice et la vérité. Voilà mon credo sur ce point-là.
The Minister of Customs, Mr. Rick Barker, I went to see about the fact that his staff had denied Mr. Zaoui his legal rights and natural justice when they questioned him, refused to take any action to rectify this matter. The Minister of Police, George Hawkins, when showed to him that a threat assessment had been issued by the police, which was just not only laughable, but it was really a basis of a frame-up against Mr. Zaoui, refused to take any action, and so forth, through all the ministers who had a role up to the Prime Minister themselves. So clearly, politics was overriding legal requirements for the ministers.
Et puis, les informations qui ont été communiquées, et puis il fallait qu'on donne des preuves à ces gens. Donc il a fallu montrer des procès-verbaux d'audition, des gens soi-disant arrêtés en Algérie qui mettaient en cause Zaoui dans le trafic d'armes, comme quoi c'était un chef qui donnait des instructions au maquis, etc. Mais ça, on a demandé l'extradition parce qu'on a dit il est responsable de l'affaire de l'aéroport, il a mis la bombe, ceci, voilà, il y a une condamnation à mort par contumace. Finalement, toutes les condamnations d'Ahmed Zaoui, ce sont des condamnations par contumace parce qu'il ne pouvait pas être présent à son procès. Bon. Mais il n'y a aucun fait, aucune preuve qui indique qu'il a réellement tenté d'introduire des armes en Algérie, qu'il a tenté de mettre en place. Il n'a pas tenté, il n'est pas capable de le faire.
I can't think my perception about people. I can't believe that people is bad, but sometimes people they got pressure from their surround or from other interests or from lobbies or something like this. But human being inside, I think is good. I don't like to judge people, really, even people who persecuted me or something like this. I'm not kind of person who likes to judge people.
Yeah, I would think that what probably coloured the external assessment was a situation happening at the time where the West is really being told to get its act together because of the risk of terrorists entering the country, entering Western countries, where in the past, people were less circumspect about someone's past. In the end, everyone's in a heightened state of alert. So the normal rational approach, we weigh up and say, well, this is pretty old, this stuff, and is it, how accurate is it? And we've all seen this before. Does this really truly represent this individual's state of security or not? I'm not saying it went out the window, but certainly it severely tested the patience of security services. And what do you do if there is a situation like this? There's a heightened sense of risk or heightened fear that something might happen. You take a conservative approach and you say, balance of probability, I don't think he should be allowed to stay.
I have concerns with the government having the power to appoint an advocate of their choice, someone that they obviously are satisfied will meet their needs. In a decent, healthy democracy where there's a decent, healthy rule of law, the accused should be able to choose his or her legal representation. This is what the government is doing is this mystifying of intelligence, that it's so secret, so sensitive, that only someone they think is appropriate can actually view it and challenge it. I think it is good that there is some sort of scrutiny, but I don't think it's necessary or acceptable that it can only be done by someone of the government's choosing. Surely, any accused should be able to choose their legal representation. The evidence, the so-called evidence, should be made available to them, and most of it would be really a low-level classification. I mean, it could be sanitised in a way that anyone could see it. But if it is so sensitive, well, then that person should be given the security clearance and vetted and be allowed to see it.
You know, it may sound trite, but knowledge is power. The way intelligence sharing occurs on the global stage is small partners rely very heavily on their larger partners for intelligence flows, and think flowing downstream. The trouble is that the further downstream you get, not only are you more dependent on what is fed to you for the broader picture, but what's fed to you is spun in the interest of the provider. These intelligence flows, some may come down and they aren't watered down. They haven't been filtered so that only glimmers of the real picture are being offered.
I think it has to be understood that these days, in the wake of the events of 2001 in America, there is a general tendency to assume that security from political violence is the dominant theme of the foreign policies of all states, and that cooperation between like-minded states, namely Western states, is something which is a desideratum that governments will seek to achieve, and that therefore security services have a significance that perhaps in the past they did not enjoy in trying to achieve such objectives, and that the New Zealand government and its security services are part of that process. Necessarily, they are going to have to accept the kind of information provided to them by other security services around the world, and New Zealand is in the unique position of being so remote from these events that it wouldn't normally have direct experience of them at all. And it seems to me that the New Zealand security services have accepted information provided by France, Belgium, Britain by the way as well, and particularly the United States, that paints a picture of a generalised and generic threat from political Islam and from people who are said to be its representatives.
New Zealand was very reliant on French intelligence for the information about would-be refugee Ahmed Zaoui to know that it could be steered in a very wrong direction because of the interests of the larger partner as opposed to the national security interests of New Zealand itself. And with that in mind, I would simply say that New Zealand appears to be recognizing that this is the state of play and has, under the leadership of Warren Tucker, again, appears to be developing a more self-sustaining intelligence capability, both in the technical and signal intelligence field as well as in the human intelligence field. But having said that, it has a long way to go.
I met enormous resistance. Some of it was along the lines of, "You're our friend, just drop it." Others responses were more hostile. Some of the members of Parliament in the Labour Party launched a broadside against Mr. Zaoui, saying they had information that he hated women. He was an absolute fundamentalist, religious fanatic, and so forth.
This sounds like it came from the women's faction within the Labour Party too, doesn't it?
Certainly some of them had their information, I later found out, the women members of the party, through the Socialist International, where I also later found out, both by my research here and my trip to Europe with Selwyn Manning to see witnesses, for Mr. Zaoui, that a faction of the Socialist International in government in France and in Belgium have close relations with Algerian parties and really with the people who run Algeria against the interests of the people there. So it wasn't very savoury. But nevertheless, even if he was someone who had these, from my viewpoint, failings, the fundamental premise of giving someone fair treatment is that you give them a fair hearing, even if you don't like their views or think you're not going to like who they are. You still have to determine and give them a fair hearing, rather than saying, well, because he's like this, he's not entitled to the full protection of the law.
Another problem is this material is so secret, the accused can't even see it. So the accused is unable to challenge it, to prepare his or her defence. It's a very, very slippery slope once you start going down that path, particularly when it's in the context of broader legislative changes to crack down on people's civil liberties.
Only towards the end of the legal proceedings came out with the fact that they had a lot of information showing that the guy was innocent, and then they dropped the case. But exactly what the interaction was between the SIS and the various ministers in charge, I'm not sure, but certainly in Parliament they ran a very strong line that there must be something wrong with this guy.
Here is a summary of allegations from the New Zealand Secret Intelligence Service that outlines its reasons for, one, detaining Ahmed Zaoui on a security risk certificate and also pushing a case that the man is a risk to New Zealand's national security. With respect to the material that is presented in that document, can you give any comments about what your view is on use of this type of evidence?
Well, frankly, I don't care what the security services claims are or the government's claims are. In some respects, I'm not actually interested in the detail of what's in this document. My concern is that every human being, guilty or innocent, regardless of what they're accused of, is entitled to a fair day in court in front of an impartial adjudicator, is entitled to see and to scrutinise and to challenge the evidence, particularly if the evidence is questionable, and is entitled to fair legal representation. Now, from my understanding of the Zaoui case, none of that is being applied to Mr. Zaoui. So regardless of his guilt or innocence, the question here is as much for New Zealanders to consider what has happened to the rule of law in this country.
Il ne peut pas être lié à la logistique. C'est pour ça que je vous dis, Zaoui est une victime. Il faut que les gens comprennent que c'est une victime d'abord. C'est pas bon. Son seul tort, c'est d'avoir lutté pour le fils parce qu'il croit en la cause du fils. Et je crois que l'un de ses torts, c'est peut-être lorsqu'il était clandestin, de ne pas connaître avec qui, parce qu'il était imam dans une mosquée, lorsque les gens venaient, on ne pouvait pas deviner si c'est un trafiquant, si c'est un professeur d'université, si c'est un commerçant. Non. Vous voyez des gens, vous leur parlez, vous ne savez pas ce qu'ils ont fait, si c'est des criminels, si c'est... Voilà son tort. Puis, je trouve légitime de pouvoir circuler, avoir un faux passe. Peut-être que moi aussi je l'aurais fait, je ne sais pas. Mais je crois qu'il a payé quand même pour cette... Si on considère que c'est une faute, il a suffisamment payé. Voilà.
Here was the decisive moment from the case, do you agree?
Well, I would think so. I mean, if you like, the case that crumbled against Ahmed Zaoui and took so long, through the hard work and dedication of his legal team, of Deborah and Rodney Harrison and Richard and others, nameless people, that all came to build a case which, when in the clear light of day, made the case of the authorities crumble. But the Zamraoui testimony was, I guess, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Ahmed Zaoui est considéré, jusqu'à preuve du contraire, comme un ennemi des généraux, donc ils lui feront payer son comportement, son action contre eux, etc. Donc pour lui, il n'y a aucune chance qu'il soit amnistié ou qu'il y ait une réconciliation ou qu'il y ait quoi que ce soit de ce genre-là. Il ne faut être honnête, il faut dire les choses telles qu'elles sont. Je crois que pour lui, l'Algérie, c'est terminé.
Of course, this raises the larger issue of the use of classified information against a person in Mr. Zaoui's position, and the director's decision itself demonstrates that he was concerned about certain allegations which he alleges were so sensitive that they could not even be put to Mr. Zaoui for comment. And this is the difficulty if the allegation can't be put for rebuttal, but is nonetheless relied on, it becomes very difficult to defend. And this is the whole issue that I think the Zaoui case points up, as I said earlier, and which needs attention.
This issue of people requesting refugee status is a very serious one, and it should be elevated to making sure that it's treated in a judicial way, not in a political way, and that there needs to be a requirement that people's claims are investigated in their totality, and not only to get the result that those higher up want. And in this case, they wanted Zaoui out, and so I think the officials fell into line.
The intelligence agencies are imperfect. They're imperfect for a range of reasons. Of course, there's incompetence, like in any large organisation, to some degree. But they're also unsuitable for a lot of purposes. Remember, the intelligence agencies were designed to spy, were built from the ground up to spy on countries, not on terrorists. So they're quite handy to spy on countries, but by design they're not well equipped to hunt down 2 or 3 extremists assembling a backpack bomb in their kitchen or their garage somewhere. And even on spying on countries, the intelligence agencies have let us down on many occasions. Arguably, the intelligence agencies didn't detect preparations for Pearl Harbor. They misread the Soviet Union badly. What was revealed after the Soviet Union collapsed was very surprising to the people in the intelligence agency. They misread that quite a lot. Intelligence agencies didn't forewarn of the first Indian nuclear tests, and we all know about the intelligence problems over Iraq.
To give an example, Foreign Affairs in Europe could have done what Deborah Manning and myself did later on, which was to go and interview witnesses and source material who were more favourable to the story of Mr. Zaoui. rather than the authorities in France and Belgium who had wanted a conviction, and that was tainted because of the close relation between France and Belgium and the regime in Algeria, which is well documented. Now, it may not have been that they came out with the same conclusion we had, but they still were duty-bound to try and be objective and to try and find any evidence that may be favourable to Mr. Zaoui that would confirm his story. It was there, we found it, and finally, of course, it was brought to the hearing in New Zealand, which finally was what led to him having the security certificate dropped against him.
The SIS, and perhaps to a lesser extent the GCSB, would be well served if they explained a little more about the nature of their business, about the methods that they use. And again, you don't have to compromise sources by talking about methods, and by certainly revealing a lot of the information that causes them to view certain individuals or groups as threats.
I don't want to overplay this. I don't want to make you think the intelligence agencies are incompetent. They're not incompetent. There's a lot of good people in them doing a lot of good work. And they score wins every day that will be forever secret. You only hear about the failures, you don't hear about the wins.
We know that, unfortunately, just like the intelligence information was manipulated to justify the invasion of Iraq in 2003, we know that the SIS has manipulated intelligence information for political purposes that have caused, in at least one instance, the unfair and one might argue illegal detention of a legitimate refugee, simply because there was no ability to scrutinize the purported intelligence until the courts got involved.
I think there's still problems in determining what intelligence information is credible. The special advocate in the Zaoui case, Stuart Grieve, when he submitted to the Select Committee on the Immigration Bill, said that about 90% of the information that he saw on Ahmed Zaoui was either public source material or not particularly credible, and I think there's still an intrinsic problem with classified information, is that if it comes from a reputable foreign agency, it is deemed to be credible. That is, the source of this information makes it credible, and particularly if that source is Australian, British or American intelligence, which the SIS is most closely linked up to.
Here there's virtually no oversight. The oversight occurs in the Prime Minister's office. And again, I've seen a slippery slope from the moment I emigrated here 13 years ago. If you're only responsible to the Prime Minister's office for oversight, then you're going to be much more politically attuned to what the Prime Minister may or may not want in terms of possible outcomes to any particular threat scenario or security equation. And that simply in a democracy, it cannot occur. You have too much centralization of power and intelligence control in the executive office.
And most students are generally suspicious of intelligence agencies. And these days you might say, might add the police, and they're fairly suspicious of the police, the motivations of people in public office. They know less about the intelligence agencies, and they also are influenced by preconceived views of how spy agencies work and what they do. In fact, much of what intelligence agencies do is excruciatingly boring. I think it's mundane stuff. It's but it has to be done. Someone has to do it. Even countries that abolish intelligence agencies create new ones to do it.
Now, in the United States, the issue simply is this: even if it is a fig leaf, it at least gives the appearance that the legislature is engaged in some measure of oversight. And of course, the open hearings, the public hearings, are clear evidence and give the public opportunity to see the intelligence service chiefs as well as their subordinates grilled by members of Congress who may not agree with some of the national security decision making. That simply doesn't occur in New Zealand. It doesn't occur at all. When the Parliamentary Oversight Committee meets, it's not a public meeting. And so who knows what goes on in there? My understanding is very little goes on and very little questioning goes on. They usually receive briefs from the director of intelligence or the director of the GCSB, and that's about it.
There isn't a relationship in the sense that people go to a daily, weekly or monthly briefing of the SIS. But what I've noticed in recent times, and certainly when I was doing the book, is that when you have a former diplomat who's the head of the SIS, director of security, who's prepared to be interviewed and prepared to take phone calls and you can talk to on a fairly regular basis, then we realised that the relationship was changing for the better. I didn't have dealings with them before, so it's very hard for me to compare, but I don't imagine that some of Woods' predecessors would have been as accommodating.
My involvement mostly with the SIS was during the Springbok tour of New Zealand by the South African rugby team, and we had people who attempted to infiltrate what we call radical groups, who we knew would be a major source of disruption to everyday goings on in New Zealand, but this SIS did as well, but we didn't tell them about our infiltrations and they didn't tell us about theirs. But I know in one occasion where a person became under considerable scrutiny by a radical group and was accused of being a spy, if you like. They weren't sure for whom. And I know that in that same group there was a SIS infiltration, and they helped promote the suspicion on this guy being a police infiltrator. So that took the heat away from them, and they used their trust and sort of acceptance with the radical group to put the heat back on the police. We found out about that later, actually.
If we looked at an operation that perhaps infiltrated immigrant groups, Islamic groups that have formed in fairly large numbers, particularly in the South Auckland area, would you see that any particular threat that may be developing in there, the role of the police or intelligence?
Well, if it's got a criminal outcome, absolutely. We wouldn't want to be shy about that, but it would have to be a criminal outcome, not a political one. That's for the SIS, I'd imagine. But certainly, if there's any hint of terrorism or a environment where terrorism is being fostered or promoted, sure, the police would be involved. Yeah, absolutely.
It can be argued that we don't really need a security intelligence agency, that the things that it actually does that have any merit, that is looking at true criminality, are probably best done by the police. And there can be a certain confidentiality around some of those activities that would then be under the police, just as there are at the present time in relation to what the police are doing and infiltrating, major criminal gangs.
Well, it's a sort of interesting area. When does something become a security intelligence issue? When is it a criminal issue? The fact is that security intelligence, in my view, there is a difference because it's a perceived threat of something that might happen or that may be happening to the national well-being, life, limb, livelihood and so on. But it depends how you view that, really. You might actually say, well, it's all criminal and what the police are doing is there can be a low-level thing.
Intelligence gathering is a process of evolution, and it's mainly dictated by technology. I mentioned earlier, I think, the days where we used to have surveillance units that used to follow and watch and observe and peer through binoculars. Today, tracking devices are fitted and interception warrants are obtained and bugs are put in houses, both audio and visual. And policemen and policewomen sit back and in the comfort of their police station and observe everything they need to observe.
There has to be a recruitment and a significant recruitment of new intelligence personnel with language capabilities and cultural sensitivities so that we can better gather knowledge about the places with whom we are engaged. And this includes the Middle East, it includes Central Asia, and by all means, it includes the Western Pacific Basin.
It may be that
for operational reasons, it's actually easier. The police are better at doing it. The police do it, drug stings, and they do infiltrate gangs. They're actually better at doing it. The SIS has had made some blues in the past, not so much recently, where they've had identified people who look like agents. They're older, they don't fit, they raise suspicions and so on. The police every day are involved in undercover operations they have already from the 70s, you know, these stings and things. They can identify a policeman and say, look, you'd be perfect, you're about right age, right background, you can live rough or whatever. It's actually quite hard. Agents are a bit of a different breed. I mean, they're civilians for a start. Police are used to doing these things. So maybe it just simply works a bit easier. It might be, yes, I want to say, well, actually, we're happy for you to do it because you're better at doing it than we are.
The thing about visiting, in the end, I think something like 30 to 40 people who we interviewed, who either knew Mr. Zaoui personally or were in a position to throw light on the sort of person he was, the situation in Algeria. The interesting thing was that across that broad range of people, we never met one person who cast any doubt on the fundamental nature of his story in New Zealand, of who he was, including people who weren't necessarily weren't members of his party, who weren't supporters of Ahmed Zaoui's philosophies in terms of politics, but respected him and affirmed that that was the man he was. And that, of course, included the famous Colonel Zamraoui, who had been an agent of the Algerian government and whose job was to track people like Ahmed Zaoui down and actually dispose of them.